So, welcome to all our listeners to another webinar and podcast in our series, The Love of the Game. Today, we're really fortunate to have with us two of the most talented and acclaimed players from the women's game. First, Kelly Smith, renowned English footballer with a stellar playing career that included 117 caps for England, during which she became the second ever England highest scorer with 46 goals in international competition. At the club level, honours with Arsenal, 5 times Premier League, champion winner, 5 times FA Cup, UEFA Champions League. And to top it off, Kelly represented Great Britain in the 2012 Olympic Games. So in 2008, Kelly was awarded the MBE for services to the game. So Kelly, great pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And Kristine Lilly, a legend in the USA and in world football, with the most national team USA appearances of any player, male or female, 354 caps in her career, during which Kristine scored 130 goals, 5 World Cup finals, winning twice, 3 Olympic Games with 2 gold medals. So an amazing career. And Kristine is now passing on all this experience to the next generation as a youth soccer coach. And our third guest today, as always, is Alf Galustian, co-founder of Coerver Coaching. Alf has a lifetime in the game, including collaborations with 20 national federations and more than 50 of the top professional clubs around the world. Alf's work is centered around the development of the Coerver Coaching method and curriculum, which has become an embedded part of youth football programs around the world. So welcome, Alf.
It's my pleasure.
So let's get going. Kelly, when you were starting out, football for girls was not really a part of the mainstream in England. So where did your love of the game come from to start with? And how did you manage to take your first steps into what turned out to be an amazing journey?
Yeah, I first started playing probably at the age of 6 years old. I just had a love for football. I would kick a football to school, being careful when I crossed the road. If I didn't have a football, I'd kick a stone or a tennis ball. And I'd always be juggling a football in my back garden. And I'd use my garage as a wall. And I'd just be passing the ball to the wall and working on my touch and control. I'd actually get some chalk and I'd draw a circle or a square and I'd back up and I'd aim for the target. And I was always playing with the boys in the playground at lunchtime and after school, jumpers down for, I should say, sweatshirts down for goalposts, and just playing 5-a-side. I just had such a love for it. It's all I wanted to do. Most of the girls wanted to be, playing with hair or playing with Barbies. I was always the one, in my tracksuit playing with the boys, and I always had a curfew of 8 p.m. had to be in for dinner or before it got dark. And I was always pushing the boundaries because I didn't want to leave. I wanted to play football for as long as I can. And there were no girls teams for me to play on. So my brother played at the time and I used to go and watch him play. And I remember I wanted the coach to see me. So I kept running down the hill to get the balls that were knocked off the pitch. And I'll be dribbling it up and doing a few step overs. I mean, like the coach to see me because I wanted to play. My dad finally asked the coach, can I play in the second couple of age groups up? And they said, yeah, come along. And that's where it started, really.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So a real love of the game, just something you were born with. Kristine, female soccer in the US has been well established for decades. So probably a more encouraged early entry into the game for you, perhaps.
Well, it's funny. It's a similar story. Obviously, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, football in America wasn't popular. I think as a young soccer player, I knew Pele. That was the only football name I knew growing up. And there was no soccer. I never saw one soccer game on TV growing up. I don't know. I can't remember when really I first saw my first game on TV. So I was just playing many sports. Like Kelly, I was 6 years old when I started playing soccer. We had recreational in our town. And I went out to play and I loved it. And my brother played, but there also were no girls teams. So I was playing with my brother and his friends. I was playing with the boys. And that happened from, I would say, age 8 to about 12 or 13. I was playing with the boys, and they let me play. And I think that was one of the greatest things that happened to me as a young kid, is that they let me join them, even though I was a girl. And so that kind of just opened my eyes to the game, but also opened my eyes and say, well, shoot, I can play this game. It doesn't matter who I'm playing with. I can play. So that was the first initial start of it for me. And thank God my brother played too, because he let me tag along as well. Kelly had, following her brother around. It was the same thing, and I think we're great examples with our older siblings that, let us jump in there or come around as much as they could handle having a little sister around.
That's great. So by the time you got to university, the game had developed a little bit. So you started to have an opportunity there, or still pretty rudimentary?
Well, sort of. I mean, look at us now. I mean, we're just talking about equal pay right now. And I mean, all the pro teams now in England for the women. So it's taken a long time. And when I went to university, had just made the national team prior 2 years earlier. So that was my first inclination of what, high level football was. And it still wasn't overly popular. I mean, we had, for us, comparable, we're celebrating the 50 years of Title IX, which was a law that passed that gave equal rights to girls and boys in anything government funded. So we're just celebrating 50 years of that. So when I went to college, that was the first, I was kind of a Title IX baby, because the law passed in 72. I was born in 71. So I think there was maybe 3 scholarships that were offered. And I think myself and Mia Hamm had one, and I had one. I'm not sure who got the third, but so
sounds
that
like
was
good timing then. Is it good timing for one of those serendipitous things?
Yeah, I was born at a good time, and just part of the whole growth. I think, Kelly and I both part of, breaking things down a bit and opening people's eyes to women's football. Yeah.
Since then, though, USA has really become sort of set a standard for the rest of the world in the sense of the infrastructure for the game, and so how did the women's game, following on after university, as you sort of in your career, become so prominent? What was the lessons you saw in terms of building the grassroots game all the way up to the top? Has come since. So what's the US done well in that sense?
I think it's might be more of a philosophy of America. Like, we're always trying to get to the top. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's part of it, but I think on the women's side is, I think we were gradually more acceptable of women doing things, and especially on the football field. I don't think it's America's pastime isn't soccer. So I think, if it was baseball that we were trying to break into, or NFL, American football, would have been a different mindset. But I think soccer was neither a man's or women's game here. It was kind of like, it's just football. No one really cared about it. So maybe that gave us the edge.
You go.
But yeah, then and we just started to play. And then when the national team started in 85, and I joined in 87, I just joined a team with women that were very similar to me, that wanted to be competitive, wanted to play hard, wanted to win, wanted to just love and be out in the game. And we got the opportunity, and then took advantage of it by just being able to come together and train and play and help the sport grow. And it's grown.
Kelly and Alf, you've had international experience. So you've been around the world in one way or another playing football. Kelly also played in the US. What are the examples that stand out for you of places you've been where the culture has really driven a sustained success in the women's game? And what was it, or who were the people who drove that forward? Kelly, from your experience.
Well, I'd have to say the USA, because I spent 7 years out there, went to college out there, Seton Hall University in New Jersey, and then playing in 2 stints in the professional league. And I just learned so many things out there, how to be a winner, the mentality that the Americans have. English people didn't have that at the time, didn't know how to win. Whereas the training sessions, especially Lil, she left everything on the line. She was one of the fittest players, if not the fittest player, and she was probably the oldest player at the time on the Boston Breakers. So that standard that they set, they know how to win, they know how to put their bodies on the line, train hard and be so focused. And I tried to bring that mentality and that shift back to my national team, because we were way far behind on that aspect. We were training trying to be full-time professionals, but obviously had jobs at the same time. So we're having to work during the day and then do our training in the evening with our club team and then our individualized training programs. So another team that we kind of looked up to at that point was Germany. They were always the team along with the USA to beat. It's like they had this conveyor belt of players coming through that were fitter, faster and stronger, and they just were monsters. We couldn't, any time that we faced the USA or Germany, at the back of our mind, it's not good to say this, but we knew we were going to lose because they were so good. But we had to go out and we had to perform as best as we could. But we were never going to beat them because they were so far advanced than us. But I think now the game where it is, you know, in 2022, England's caught up, Holland's caught up. There's so many other national teams, Sweden, to name a few. I think it's not always USA now in Germany. There's other national teams that are vying for Olympics, World Cups and Euros. And that's great to see because you don't want to see one team winning it easily all the time. And the game needs to evolve, and it has certainly the last, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So the game's in such a healthy place now.
Yeah, Alf, you spent many years in Japan, from the early days where Japan, where Kristine and Kelly talk about the start of their football careers and where women's football was. But 25 years ago, Japanese men's and women's football was just getting going.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say you've been really integral and part of developing football in Japan. So tell a little bit about that story and also the women's game there.
Yes, well, when I went in '93, the J League had just started. That's the professional league in Japan, but it was a male league, and still there was hardly any women's soccer there. And so one of the main things was to try to establish some sort of structured, grassroots, because there was the Americans tried to do it in my playing days with the NASL, the American Professional League, importing mainly a lot of English with other players and trying to sort of, start a league from nothing with no tradition. Japanese did exactly the same. Zico came, Gary Lineker and other players, etc. And so one of the pluses was then they got the idea that, no, it's got to be, you need to establish players from your own country and develop those players. But if you fast forward 25 years later, Japan's won the Women's World Cup. Many of their players are playing overseas. So Japanese culture is a little bit different from my experiences with the US and other countries. I agree totally with Kelly. My wife's American, so I know women are strong and want to win, but Japanese have a different culture. So what they do is quietly look, copy, and then try to take the best bits and then do it better, if that makes sense, whether it's football or if it's computers or whatever. And they did exactly the same in football, and they studied the Americans especially, because in women's football, they really are the trailblazers, and all credit, now it's a different situation. It's more popular and it's more worldwide, but people like Kristine really deserve unbelievable credit for being there at the early days. But Japan copied, took the best, whether it's in coaching, whether it's in sports science, and also started bringing girls in at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And Kelly knows, certainly when I grew up, I'm guilty. I'm as guilty as anybody. I grew up and I thought football was for, there was no girls. When you were a player, there wasn't any girls football, So I grew up in a chauvinistic way. And so I think it made me appreciate. And then when I started learning a little bit about women's football, women's soccer, I thought, look, this is a perfect game. It's technical. It's beautiful aesthetics. It's like Pele or Arsene would say, it's a beautiful game, and so it's perfect. And So I got hooked into it first by the US, and then my work in Japan sort of convinced me that look, this should be taken seriously. It's not, you know, and we're going to talk about it later, but it hasn't been, and it, with great respect, it still isn't. Yeah, I know it's better, but it still isn't. My new money in the women's game compared to the men's game.
So, Alf, just building on that, Kristine and Kelly, so how, still in many cultures around the world, the men's game is the number one game, and the women's game develops. So how do we encourage more female players into the game, particularly the young age, and particularly, for instance, here in Spain, senior players, yes, but culturally, girls going into football is still, it's not the mainstream thought for parents and whatever. And there are many cultures like that. So what can we do to encourage more girls to get into the game, do you think? It's a big question, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'll just start. I was just doing something a couple weekends ago and talking about the diversity and inclusion of getting girls more involved in the game. And I think one thing that we need to do or change more so is just the dialogue about it. So I think we need to speak about the women's game more, and that goes to not only women, but more so on the men's side.
Yeah.
Guys need to speak about the game, and guys need to be not put it down when they do have the opportunity to talk about it. Obviously, everyone's going to have their opinion, and I respect that. But I think also the dialogue has always been very negative on the women's game. Oh, it's just a women's game, you know. So if we start to change that dialogue with the older generation of people, then that will trickle down to the younger. And I think here in America, I think we have to do a pretty good job with our grassroots and the opportunities for young girls going on now here. So, you know, we have the kids play, they don't play through their schools, but they play through their towns associations, and offer, you know, recreational for all kids. And obviously then we have our club system that has kind of taken control of youth sports, which that's a whole nother topic. But it does give girls the opportunity. So we do have opportunities for girls. And I think it starts to change where girls, as they start to get older into high school, they start to fall off the game. If you're not, you know, an elite player, or more so a good player, you're falling off the game. And I think we're losing players there. And I think that's where we need to regroup in America about. But I think for the grassroots, we have a good system, I think, opening the doors for young girls to play.
Kelly, do you see that in England, you know, the community level, and do you see that growth, or are there things that could be done to improve the attraction of the game for girls?
Yeah, certainly. I think grassroots soccer is massive in America from my experiences out there, and it's probably grown since I've obviously not living in the country now. But over here in England, grassroots football is very difficult for girls to play in. So what we are trying to do over here as an FA and as a federation, I'm actually an ambassador for Barclays, which is the main sponsor of the Women's Super League, the professional league here. And what we're trying to do is give equal access to girls to have the opportunity to play football in schools, because there's not a lot of club teams for them to play on. You know, and we're trying to grow that aspect of the game, but where they can get their taster for it is in schools. So by 2024, we want to have equal access. So if a boy has the chance to play football in a school, girls should have it. And I think there's also a lot of girls that fall away out of that pathway because they don't want to play with boys. Maybe they're not got the confidence or the self-esteem. So to give them just a girls session, to give them a taster of it, and then to help them enjoy it, that's what we're keen on doing here, helping them have that opportunity. Certainly I was the only girl playing football in a boys team like Kristine. So these girls now have this opportunity to play in schools, and then if they like that, then there's a club team potentially for them to play on. And I think there is certainly a pathway now for them from school to club, and then the national team set up, whether it's the under 15s, under 17s, 19s, 21, 23s or whatever. There's a pathway that if you are good enough, that you can have the opportunity to play for your national team if you're good enough.
Yeah. So the role of the coach in that, so carrying on that discussion, in terms of attracting girls, do you think girls will react more positively to a female coach? And if so, how do we get more women involved in coaching, because there are really not that many women stepping into coaching. Kristine,
Well,
you're a mother coach,
yeah.
and even in the US, though, not
Yeah.
so
Well,
many.
you know what's interesting is I grew up playing for male coaches, and growing up, I didn't think anything of it. You know, to me, a man or woman before, I don't necessarily think that is the deciding factor on me loving the game. I think, you know, you have someone that's coaching you that cares to be out there, enabling you have a team. So that's wonderful. I think what is important is to give girls the opportunity to coach. And that is what we're missing. Not necessarily that there's opportunities, but still it's the same thing Kelly was talking about, young girls joining in England. They don't want to play with the boys. For women to go to a coaching course that's predominantly male, that's not overwhelmingly comfortable sometimes. And especially if you still have that same mentality of the male thought process on women's soccer. So like I said, if we start changing the thought process and those environments become a little bit more welcoming to women, I think that will help a ton. I know I've worked with Alf a ton. We're trying to organize, you know, coaching courses just for women to come out, to have the opportunity to learn to do a session, you know, just to get their feet wet and feel comfortable with that. And I've gone to a group that did an all-female coaching session, and they loved it. It was they spoke so highly of like, oh, this is such a great environment. So I think we're need to open the door for that. And I hate to say just to make a women's course, because we've been fighting for so long to get the opportunity to play, and then we're going to isolate the men. You know, it's one of those things. But I think we do need to let the women to get their feet wet and get the opportunity to be in an environment where they're going to grow and want to be in. And I think that may be where it's just female only. But I think to have a coach, to me, a good coach is a male, female. It doesn't matter to me. And I think it's it might be the same for girls as well. But I do know one thing, that if women, and I do a lot of coaching for youth, so I'm around boys and girls constantly. I do think it's very important for young boys to see women coaching, because that changes their mentality, and seeing like, oh, okay, you know, and just see, they were like, oh, women coach, like I have a female coach. It's just a common thought, instead of thinking men. So I do think there's a role for both. And I do think if we educate both sexes on coaching and they grow as coaches, it's really going to be a great opportunity for any kid to have a qualified coach in front of them.
And Kelly, in England, well, around the world, but in England as well, you see women referees. That's kind of a new thing. You have women broadcasters like yourself. And those are movements in the right direction, I would say. Yes. Yeah,
definitely. There's more opportunities and doors open now, more so than ever before, because of the evolution of the women's game. I went on a bespoke female course when I was coming to the end of my career, and the FA made that available for us because they didn't want to lose my generation of players the knowledge that we've gained over the years. So they put on for the players that were coming to the end of their careers that maybe wanted to go into coaching or get a taster of it, like Kristine just said, they put on this specialized course and they catered it to our needs. And it was a small course because obviously people were up and down the country, but they brought us together and we were coaching male and female footballers. But I think that was important for us because we could have just lost and come away from the game. But those players now, a few of them have stayed in the game, have got their A license or B license, which are quite high licenses over here. And they've stayed involved in the game because I think when you've played the game as long as me and Lil, we've got a fountain of knowledge, and to keep us involved in the game in some way, to share that on to the next, the new kids coming through, or the next generation, we've got such a lot to give back. So that's always been important. And I think, it is important, like Lil said, about having male allies. We've got a couple of male allies that sit on punditry work within our game. Ian Wright is a big Arsenal fan, and he's also an advocate of the women's game. And because he's involved so highly and so highly regarded in the men's game, when you see him speaking about the women's game, it normalizes it. And people think, oh, Ian Wright's talking about women's football, I'll give it a try. So they have such powerful voices. We've got quite a few of them that transfer over from the men's game into the women's game. And it gives us that little bit more high profile. So it's good to have them on board.
Yeah. Alf, have you seen signs of that in Japan in your recent visits? You know, you've seen the women's game world champions, but in coaching, in the infrastructure of football there?
Not as much as I've seen in sort of US and the UK. It tends still to be men coaching women, in general, because I mean you've got the pro game, so some of the clubs are sort of have women's teams attached to them, but you know, to the point that Kristine and Kelly was saying about how men can. Pep said one thing about the women's game. You know, Man City win championship. You know, it goes all over the world. If the women's team came on to maybe share that cup, or you need some of the big, and they're busy, and they're. A lot of them will support the women's game, but that's different from publicly coming out and making a big deal out of it. And I know with Arslan now that Arsenal's at FIFA, and he believes it. I mean, he's my generation, and he also grew up, didn't really understand, you know, didn't think it was a women's game. And Arslan's like changed, like not changed, because he's always a very sort of considerate man, but he knows that it's probably the future of football, because in the men's game, where are we going to go? I mean, we need, you know, we've all the money's there, all the players are there. It's a women's game that's got the great potential. You know, I personally, I'd like that there's the grassroots, and where, for example, in my area, we've got a league, the Surrey Youth League. There's nearly 600 teams in one league. I mean, it's 20. I don't know. We've got 16 professional teams in London. You know, I mean, if each of them had an under 12 team, not under 16, not under 18, I understand that, most of the clubs. But if they went from 12s and 14s and 16s, then it goes back to money. Well, who's going to fund it, right? And there's loads of money, certainly here. And so, you know, it's a question of some of the big men, high-profile guys in soccer, and more money being allocated, and saying, right, so you know that money should be, you know, if we're talking about coaches, so coaches' education, so put some money so that at least women coaches can be mentored. I mean, like me and Kristine, you know, I've been mentoring her for many years. I don't say you need more, but that's what should happen. That, you know, so I've been a long time in this, and whatever little I know or whatever I know, I try to pass on, and then she's got my knowledge as well, and some more mentoring by men, but women doing the coaching, but men doing the mentoring, because they've just had more opportunity to be at a high level.
Okay, so let's go back and talk about the game itself, learning the game. We've talked about the big ecosystem of the game. So let's talk a bit about the skills and that players need to be successful. So Kristine and Kelly, you both scored a lot of goals in your career. So this question then, what do you think makes a top goal scorer, and the kind of skills and mentality you need that kept that ball coming from your foot into the goal? Kristine.
Well, shoot. I think a little bit of hunger. You got to have that desire and love and want to score first off to do that. And you also have the mentality that you're not going to score all the time. So when you don't, you got to keep going at it. But then if you look at the technical skill, I mean, I played against Kelly and with Kelly, and I prefer Kelly on my team. But I've never seen a player. I'm a lefty, but Kelly's a lefty. But the things she could do with her left foot, I can't do. Like, and I have a little bit more of a right foot probably than Kelly. But what she can do with that left foot, like, I mean, technically, and I mean, I was always amazed, and that's why I prefer on my team. But the way she could bend the ball and finish the ball. So goal scoring is not just about putting in the net; it's how you put it in the net. You know, so I'm probably more of a power finisher than a finesse finisher, but you placing it in the corners, placing it high, you know, chipping a keeper or keeping it low when they're up. You know, there's all those elements that do come when you see some of the greatest finishers. Obviously, I was lucky to play with Mia, and she was one of the greatest finishers I've been a part to see and play with. But there's a lot of elements that do come into play. But I think one of the things is to be hungry. You got to want to score, and especially when you're in that inside that penalty box and having the composure to find the way that you need to finish. And that's when you see the good players go to the great players, the ones that can find different ways to find the back of the net. And that's fun to see and fun to play with, but not fun to play against. But you're seeing a lot of young players, or here in America, a lot more young players are more technical than even when I was growing up. So they're having that element at a younger age. Plus now the coaching that we do have in America, there's soccer coaches, football coaches. You know, when I grew up, it was dads that didn't even know what the heck what they're doing. They're just like, just boot the ball. Yeah. You know, now there's, you know, soccer verbiage that's coming out that's teaching proper technique and whatnot. So these younger kids have more technical ability coming up. But I do see one thing they're lacking a little bit is the mental capacity and the strength and the like, oh, I'm getting tired, or you're getting critiqued and the kids are like frail. They're like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? You know, when we were younger, we got told what to do. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this. Yeah. So it's a balance of all those elements to be a great finisher. And then you see those ones shine that have the balance of it.
Great. Kelly, tell us about your left foot.
Yeah, Kristine's right. I was very left foot dominated. Right foot was mainly for standing on, but I probably practiced more on my right foot over the years. I would have been a little bit less predictable, but I grew up doing a lot of curver moves, being comfortable on the ball, kind of dancing on the ball, getting really familiar with it. And a lot of that was by myself in the garden. And like I said, against the brick wall, pulling the ball back. And a lot of it's repetition. You know, when you're practicing with your team, it's feeling confident on the ball. It's not letting your head drop if you miss the target. You've got to believe in yourself and know your teammates too, because I was mainly in the center of the pitch. So I could either create goals for myself, or I'd be relying on service from my left-sided player or my right-handed-sided player. So you have to learn and understand how to play with your teammates and know what service that is coming in certain areas and work on your movement. You know, anticipating where the ball's going to go in certain situations. And that comes with practice, doing that in training sessions with your teammates day in, day out, and repetition, you know, getting that feeling of hitting the back of the net. There's no better feeling for me than scoring a goal, especially in a final or something that really, really matters. And it's various types of finishes that you can work on, passing the ball into the back of the net, your outside of the foot, your weaker foot. Scoring goals is fun, and I think Kristine hit the nail on the head. Hunger. You've got to be hungry to score a goal as a striker. That's your job, to put the ball in the back of the net, and that's certainly what I love to do. Yeah,
great. Alf, you've been teaching this skill of finishing for many years. What's your thought on that?
Well, look, you've got two people that have done it, so but I'll just give you my thoughts. So I'm not a great stats man, but you've got to look at stats. And so if you take it without me showing you, accept that 99.9% goals are scored within 30 meters of goal, right? And then if you think that a big proportion, 70 plus, of first-time strikes from 15 meters. So let's say you take those, and the higher level you play at, the less time and space you've got in those areas. So as a coach, it gives you a clue. So that, you know, so what would the DNA of your practice be? Well, if so many goals are scored with one touch, and then some with two touch, and then you've got finishing on the run, and then you've got no space, so you've got to use 1v1 to create space to shoot. So you've got all the DNA of what you need to teach. And now there is one thing that, you know, I'm not sure about the you know, my view, because I'm not qualified, is this whole thing about some goals scored by heading. And I know in the USA, through science, they've said that they don't want under 10s heading. One of my best friends is a neurologist. He sees the relevance of that, the credibility of that. But there are goals scored at the senior level in the air. I don't know what's going to happen with heading, but that's another discussion. So as a goal scorer or talking about goal scoring, you've got two parts, right? You've got creating the goal chance and finishing goal chance. And creating the goal chance is basically to do with your reaction speed, your timing, whether your touch, because there's no space and time there. So again, as a player, as Kelly and Chris have done, you sort of sharpen those weapons, if you like, because there's no space and no time. And I think 1v1 in this particular, I know we're going to maybe talk about it a bit later on, but to me, all strikers should be better at 1v1. It's not a criticism of any player, but this could be the difference between 5 shots in a game and 2 shots in a game. Because there's no space. Is it 1v1? People think it's just dribbling, it's going past players. It's not. It's creating space to the right or left to shoot. So, in other words, that should be a staple diet of coaching strikers. And it isn't. I mean, I know when I worked at Bayern Munich with Jürgen Klinsmann, Jürgen had a striker, Luca Toni, big guy, about 6'6" from Italy. And, he was 26 at that time, but Jürgen wanted him to have an option. But with great respect, there was no way. I hadn't learned it as a kid. So it's a powerful thing for a striker.
Yeah. Alf, one comment you had made in a discussion we were having was when you go out and watch youth teams play and you watch girls teams play, somewhat it's like passing seems to be the default when a player gets the ball. You see more that's what's being coached. You get the ball, you pass it. And that you talked about 1v1 as the critical skill. And there seems to be a little bit of reluctance in the girls' game, young girl game, to actually take players on and attack individually. Why do you?
I spoke to Kristine about this. She'd know more than me. Look, if you go to if you're a pro academy anywhere in Europe and you go to, let's talk about under 12s, for example. You've got these kids, they're good. They can beat 3, 4, 5 players, and they've got the personalities to do it. In other words, then they'll do a somersault and give each other a high five. So it's part of hey, look at me, I'm good, And my limited experience with girls of that age is that they're much more modest. There's just a degree more of a bit more consideration. But we've Kristine and I've talked about it. She's better equipped to answer that one.
Well, I think it's funny when I remember coming up through the system, and Kelly mentioned during the Coerver skills and all that. I mean, I remember growing up, and then Anson Dorrance taking over the national team, and we used to do our warm up. We used to call them Coervers. Now, if he took it from Anson, one thing Anson did would he would find the best people that were teaching stuff and try to take it and teach it to us. So we would do technical skills, inside, outside, top of the ball, outside. I mean, that's what we did over and over and over again. So the repetition helps, and it creates you the opportunity to be able to do things. And the other thing that Anson talked about all the time was everywhere on the soccer field is a 1v1 element. You have to constantly go against one person. So as a country, early on in the late 80s, early 90s, all we did was just take people on. Anson would take them on. Obviously not in our defensive third, but everywhere else in the field, it was so encouraged to do that. So, and like I said, you're not successful all the time. So you have to have that mentality to keep going after it. So that was what I remember so much as a young player on the national team about our philosophy in America. And then now being on the other side of it, and I'm coaching young kids, and I'm listening to parents coaching and parents on the sideline, and I'm teaching, obviously the Coerver method, and I'm teaching players to take on and encouraging that. And all you hear from everywhere else, and this is, I'm talking U11 and under, is pass the ball, pass the ball. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, but they can't receive it. You know, you can pass the ball, but then the kids don't know what to do with it. So, you know, it's a mentality here, and I think parents and I think on society, everyone should share the ball, which you should, yes, but these kids can't. So we're not telling them to take on the whole team, but my mentality is encouraging you, beat a player. Once you beat a player, then see what the next option is, to build that confidence that you can solve the pressure yourself and you can do it, and then you can bring in your players as well. So girls do have a tendency to want to please, and will look to maybe pass because that makes someone else happy instead of taking on and someone being like, oh, she just took a player on them, feeling that. So girls, we have some issues that we need to figure out ourselves.
I think that's a good penalty, Chris, you know?
No, it is great. But I think also just encouraging, you know, and teaching the proper, you know, that you can take a player on, then you can find someone and solve the game that way is something that I think a lot of coaches that do know the game are trying to teach, but parents are looking, pass the ball.
Yes,
pass the ball.
So Kristine, the influence of a coach then is really important in that freeing up players to take the risk to play.
Yeah,
you got. And but that's something. It's almost like permission. Kelly, did you feel that when you were growing up in the game, or again growing up around boys, perhaps in more? Were you a 1v1 player?
Definitely, that's all I wanted to do. Dribble, take people on, beat 1, 2, 3, 4, score myself or set up my teammate if they're in a better position. That was just part of my game as a kid. Really fast and technical on the ball, using your hips and your body to sway and get the defender off balance. And then obviously the skills that you've learned, you know, all the hours that you've logged over the years come into play and you get more confident. And I'm a big believer in, I used to watch a lot of soccer on TV growing up. It was obviously it's really big from day dot here, match of the day, the roundup of the weekend's games on a Saturday night. And I would watch Ryan Giggs. He was left-footed.
He's my favorite, Kel.
The same position that I was growing up, out on the left. You know, very technical on the ball, fast, took players on, just like I was. I didn't want to be Ryan Giggs. I wanted to learn from him. And I watched him do certain things in certain positions. When did he pass the ball? What did he do after? When did he take players on? What did he do when he got to the byline? Where did he cross it? So I analysed his game all the time. And if I couldn't stay up and watch the game, I'd tape it on a VCR and then watch it the next morning and say, right, what did he do? And then I'd have that in my brain, and then I'd go and replicate that on the football pitch with my teammates. So watching games is a big plus for me because I learned so much from different players over the years.
Yes, and Alf, with Coerver, you based a lot of the methodology on 1v1 from analyzing how the top players use that skill.
Yes, well, I mean, when Charlie and I, you're talking about almost 40 years, that was the main basis. But right, without boring you, on Monday, I'm doing a tribute to Stanley Matthews. Stan was my mentor, really, as a young player, and then for coaching, I think he got me into coaching, and he's known as maybe in history the greatest 1v1 player. So on Monday at Tottenham, his family have asked me to do a tribute clinic for him, and so 1v1's always been, you know, even as a young player myself and a little kid, exactly what Kel was saying. You know, just go and play until it was dark, and you know, even try to beat the tree. But you know that
How'd that go, Alfie?
My stomach went into the tree. But yes, it's always been a special topic for us, and I think it's essential. I think it can make a difference in the game. I know many things can. You know, Mike, I've said to you before, my special interest is 30 meters from goal. I know there are other places on the field that are important, but my real heart is 30 meters from goal, and that's where you can win the game. And 1v1, I think, is especially now we've more or less worked out how to defend. You know, if my Italian colleagues would put 10 people in front of you, with great respect to anybody Italian listening, but you know that this certain coaches play a certain way, but you know we know how to defend. 1v1 can unlock that door.
Alf, I think we got maybe like 5 more minutes. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. So just on the topic of coaching, so we talked about technical coaching. There's another side to coaching, and Kelly, you've been a leader in raising the profile in the area of sports and mental health. Now, in youth football and as coaches, do you think there's a need for coaches to be more aware of this area when coaching young players, or is it more of a senior players issue, and particularly at the professional level?
That's a good question. Obviously, yeah, I've had my issues over the past, but I do think it is important that young kids, if they are going through anything in their personal life, social life, that they have somebody they can reach out to, because keeping everything inside does not help anybody. And having that confidence to reach out to your coach, to a family member, to a friend, speak about whatever you're going through. Don't hold on to it, because it eventually ends up hurting you. And when you reach out to someone, they can help you. So it is important that, you know, you do get sports psychologists on board as young as possible. I'm a big believer in that part of the game. A lot of the game is played up here, and if you're not right up here, how are you going to perform? So yeah, I think, you know, having someone to speak to or reach out to at a young age is very, very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, our last question. England this summer will be the proud host of the UEFA Women's Euros in July. So Kelly and Kristine, can you pick out 2 teams from the Euros that you think young players might watch particularly, and what are the qualities or the team style that attract you and you think are great role models, teams and also individual players? What do we have in store, Kelly?
Wow, I'm going to have to side with England. I think they're in a really, really good place. I know they've had a really easy qualification period, and that's no fault of their own, but I think they've got the right manager in place in Serena Wiegman. She's experienced, she's done it before at a home Euros in 2017. She led the Netherlands to win the Euros on home soil. So she's got that in her locker. She's got a fantastic group of players, really technically gifted, probably the most talented England side that I've seen since I've been alive. A good mix of experience, some very exciting talent. Hopefully Fran Kirby will be fit. Lauren Hemp is certainly a player to watch out for. She's had a stellar season for Manchester City, and she actually reminds me a lot of myself growing up. Similar kind of player on the left, very dynamic, very comfortable with the ball at her feet. She gets spectators off her seat when she gets the ball at her feet. She's that good, and she's unknown really on the world stage because I think she's only 21. And they've got a solid defence, and it's on home soil, and that could be an advantage for them. All their home games have sold out. All the England games have sold out, so they've got a full capacity to play against. The finals at Wembley, it's written for them. It's just how they can deal with the pressure and the expectation of that, and I think they'll be loving it. I think also Spain are favourites. I was in Turin in Italy this past weekend watching the Women's Champions League final. I know a lot of the Barcelona players play for the national team, and they're a pleasure to watch the way they play the game. However, they're not as clinical in front of goal, so that could maybe stop them from going further or later in the tournament. They're my 2 strong candidates. Yeah. Holland, there's so many. God, wow, can I just pick 1 or 2?
Yeah, you think it for young players, it's something to absolutely tune into. They're going to pick up on all kinds of great things. Kristine, Holland, sorry, Kelly.
I've got to dip in and say Holland. You know, the talent that they have is so good technically. You've got Miedema, one of the best strikers in the world on your team. When you've got her, you're laughing. Norway, go on, Lil, you can go on now.
Yeah, well, I know.
Kristine, what is it as an inspiration for young players? You know, what should they be looking for?
Well, I think, you know, what's so great about this. I mean, when I think about the European Championships, both on the men's and women's side, it's just a smaller World Cup. I mean, you got most of the top teams in the world already just playing in this event, and you know, this is something I mean, as an American player, I wish that we could join in on. But Kelly talked about the two. I mean, England, Spain were the two teams I like. France is always the team, in Germany. You know, they're always quality. You know, they've been there. They know what it takes, especially Germany. I think France needs to get over that hump. They need to just win something big to give their players that confidence that they can, because they're always right there. So I just think for young kids, it's an opportunity to see some of the best soccer out there. You know, it's at the highest level, some of the best players. So, and it's every day from, was it July 6th on, that you can see a quality game. And I know for a fact, I think it's going to be on TV everywhere, you know, and that's something that's really exciting. And that's something we've missed back when Kelly and I played, the opportunity to see the women's game at the highest level on TV right in front of us. So I think it's going to be a great summer for players to be able to watch. And I think this is going to be a great opportunity for England. I mean, hosting, I mean, there's nothing like it. You got your fans there. It's already sold out crowd, and hosting this great event. So I'm rooting for England, Cal. So you got me on your side. And I know Serena Wingman very well, so I hope she does well with the English team. And I'll see Lucy Bronze, you know, she played at Carolina, so I have the little Carolina connection with her. But I just think
have to come over if they get to the final.
I know. I was just looking at the final dates. I'm like, I'm free. Alfie, Coerver something. Let's do
Okay,
something.
yeah. Well, you got a place to stay, you know that.
No, but it would be this is a kind of environment. I mean, it's just right below the World Cup. I mean, not that the quality is the same as the World Cup, but it's just not as big. But these are the environments that will help the women's game grow to the next level.
Yeah. Okay, well, on that great upbeat final comment, and looking forward to a great summer. Big thanks to Kristine Lilly and to Kelly Smith and to Alf Galustian for your time and your great insights and sharing your love of the game. And we wish you well.